Thorns of the Waking Court, a video book, brought to you by SDC Multimedia. Chapter 1. The Grove of Offering. They blindfolded her before dawn, the scratch of coarse linen against her skin sharp and uncomfortable. It pressed across her cheeks like the weight of an accusation, the fabric soaked through with dew, its heavy scent mingling with the iron tang of old blood. The darkness that clung to the edges of the cloth seemed to draw the night closer to her, swallowing any trace of the world beyond. Calla's breath was slow, steady, but her heart pulsed a frantic rhythm in her chest. She didn't fight when they dragged her from her cell. What was the point? She had already spent the hours of the night standing barefoot on cold stone, feeling the bite of it through the soles of her feet, her gaze fixed on the narrow slit of moonlight beneath the door, memorizing every flicker of shadow that crossed it like it might be her last sight of the world. It would be, one way or another. The guards didn't speak, but the force of their hands, rough and uncaring, told her everything she needed to know. They weren't here to ask questions or offer sympathy. Their grip tightened, dragging her along the stone corridors, out into the open air, their boots scuffing against the earth with an ominous rhythm. Their movements were deliberate, too practiced, too measured. They had done this before. She could hear the shift of the trees in the distance, the faintest rustle of leaves, but the birds, those creatures that had once woken the sky with their songs, remained silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew what this morning would bring, what it had been waiting for. Calla felt the ground change beneath her feet as they led her deeper into the woods. The familiar scent of pine and earth slowly gave way to something darker, something ancient. The air thickened with a scent that was sharp and metallic, rot and roses, and the musky, overpowering stench of something that didn't belong in the waking world. Pollen clung to the air, thick with the weight of forgotten promises, and the unmistakable bitter taste of copper filled her mouth. The grove was near. She had no need to see it to know. The Grove of Thorns, a place of sacrifice, where lives were offered and lost, where the roots of the ancient trees reached deep into the earth, feeding off the blood of those foolish enough to draw near. She stumbled as her foot caught on a twisted root. The ground beneath her was uneven, treacherous, but it wasn't the earth she feared. It was what lay ahead, buried deep beneath the soil. She barely registered the hand that caught her elbow, steadying her, its grip firm and callous. "Watch your step, witch," one of the guards growled, his voice rough like gravel. Witch. That was what they called her now. Witch. Anyone touched by old blood, anyone with a connection to the forgotten magic of the earth, was a witch. Never mind that she had done nothing to deserve this fate. Never mind that her mother had hidden her away for 17 years, buried deep in the forgotten village of Root Hollow. She had never wanted any of this. Her mother had warned her to never speak to the trees, to never touch the moonlit pool, to never listen when the grove whispered her name. But the whispers had come anyway. Calla had heard them long before she had ever dared step into the forest. The calls that came in the dead of night, a haunting melody that drifted through the cracks of her dreams. At first, she thought they were just that, dreams, but with every passing day, the whispers had grown louder, more insistent. They had become a part of her, and now there was no escape. The guards shoved her forward. Her knees buckled as they reached the stone altar at the heart of the grove, the cold, damp stone biting into her skin as she fell to the ground. She gritted her teeth, biting down on the pain, forcing herself not to cry out. The scent of decay, of forgotten rituals and blood-stained earth was suffocating now. The altar was slick with morning dew, slick with something else too, something darker, something far older. A voice spoke then, its tone calm and practiced, as though the speaker had performed this ritual countless times before. The words were familiar, a chant that echoed through the generations, used to summon the old gods, to offer the innocent as payment for a debt long owed. Let it be known that Calla of no house, daughter of the Oathbreaker, is offered to the Grove of Thorns as payment. Let the old ones accept her blood. Let the curse be sated. The words cut through the air like a blade, final and cold. A pause followed, stretching out in the silence like a heavy, suffocating fog. Then there was the rustle of silk, an elegant sound, too practiced to be anything but the swish of fine robes. Someone had drawn close, a priest perhaps, or the chancellor himself, hiding behind the ritual, behind the words that had bound so many before her. Her chest tightened. She had heard the stories. The Grove of Thorns did not take its sacrifices lightly. What happened to girls like her was well known. The grove had a hunger for blood, a thirst that could only be sated by the offering of young lives. And once the blood touched the roots, the trees would awaken, awakening the dark forces that had slumbered beneath the earth for centuries. The thought of what would come next twisted her stomach. She would be swallowed by the trees, her body would be consumed, and her name would be lost, carried away on the wind like so many others before her. Any last words, girl? The voice was smooth, condescending. Calla lifted her chin, though the blindfold pressed tight against her skin. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground, determined not to break before them. She had no intention of begging for mercy. She had none to give. "Tell the Chancellor," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of fear swirling inside her. "He'll choke on my name when the trees come for him." Silence. Then the sound of a laugh, short, dry, empty. The blade was drawn then, whispering free from its sheath. The sound a sharp, cruel promise in the quiet. Calla didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She didn't scream. The moment stretched out. Her breath quickened, but she held her ground. A breath. Another. Then the world tore open. The wind, which had been still, so still it seemed unnatural, suddenly reversed. It screamed through the trees, pulling the air back toward the heart of the grove. The ground shook beneath her, cracking open like the earth itself had decided to rise up in rebellion. Roots, thick as limbs, twisted upward through the soil. The bark of the ancient trees split open, revealing dark, gnarled fingers covered in thorns that reached for the sky as if in search of something or someone. The first guard shouted in surprise, but his words were lost in the chaos as the roots began to thrash, their hunger sharp and merciless. One of the guards was dragged beneath the earth before he could even take a step. The other dropped his sword and bolted, running for his life. The blindfold tore free as Calla was thrown to the ground. The last thing she saw before the world dissolved into darkness was the sky, torn wide open by green lightning that crackled and tore across the heavens. The altar shattered, its pieces scattered into the air like shards of glass, and then the grove swallowed her whole.